I'm 29, and my name's Mason. Thanksgiving has always been a weird holiday for my family, like some sort of staged production we all pretend to enjoy while secretly checking the time, counting down the minutes until we can make our escape. But this year felt colder, sharper somehow. The past few years had been rough for me, quiet. I lost my job during the layoffs, moved into a smaller apartment, picked up contract gigs just to stay above water. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Jenna, was being paraded around like the reincarnation of Einstein because she landed a PR job at some tech startup and curated a perfectly polished life on Instagram. My parents adored it, devoured it like scripture. Still, I never thought they'd be so open about their favoritism. When I showed up at their house this year, something already felt off. The porch light was barely on, and no one answered the door for a good solid minute. When it finally creaked open, my mom stood there with a wine glass in hand, wearing one of those over-the-top festive sweaters she probably bought just to look cute in the family pictures. "Oh, you came," she said, blinking like I hadn't RSVP'd. No hug, no smile, just those three words, flat, like an afterthought. I stepped in, carrying the pie I'd baked. She barely glanced at it before muttering, "We already have dessert." I walked into the dining room and froze. The table was set for 10. 9 chairs filled, one spot left, but no place setting. Just an empty space in the corner by the window, where the light didn't quite reach. I waited for someone to notice. No one did. Jenna waved from across the room, all bubbly and loud, her fiancé already deep in conversation with my uncle. My dad gave me a short nod from the kitchen, but otherwise, I might as well have been a ghost. I placed the pie awkwardly on the counter and went to sit in the living room, alone. Dinner was called an hour later. Everyone filed in, laughter bouncing off the walls, silverware clinking. I stood near the back, waiting to see where I should sit. Eventually, I just dragged a stool over from the bar and slid it up to the end of the table. Nobody said a word. They just let it happen. Halfway through dinner, the wine had loosened everyone's tongues a little too much. That's when it started. My mom stood up, glass raised, and called for attention. "I just want to say how proud I am this year," she began, her voice already thick from wine and self-congratulation. "There's nothing more meaningful than watching your child thrive, so let's toast to the only child who actually made us proud." For a second, I swear, time stopped. The air tightened like a noose. Forks froze midair. Then, every head turned to Jenna, and they clapped. They clapped like it was rehearsed, like they all knew their marks. Jenna beamed like she just snagged an Oscar. Even her fiancé stood up to applaud. My mom looked at her like she was made of gold, and my aunt leaned in to whisper, "She really is the jewel of this family." My hands were cold. I hadn't touched my plate. Cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes, turkey. I didn't even want it. Something in me cracked, but it didn't shatter. It was quieter, intentional. I pushed back the stool. The screech of metal on wood turned a few heads. I looked down the table, heart pounding. Thanks for finally saying it out loud. That's when my dad, who'd barely spoken all night, set his glass down hard enough to make it ring. "Wait," he said. "Tell them what you did." I froze. Every face turned. My mom's smile faltered. Jenna looked genuinely confused. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Jenna asked, all sweetness and sugar. My dad leaned back in his chair and looked at me, not angry, just expectant. And in that moment, I felt every eye lock onto me like I was holding a live grenade. I hadn't planned for that night to become what it did. I just wanted to eat, maybe exchange a few polite words, then go home and drown myself in leftover pie. But apparently that wasn't happening, not after what I had done, and not after what they were about to find out. I hadn't told anyone in the family yet, not even my dad. I hadn't thought he knew, but clearly he did, and now he was forcing my hand. I glanced at him. He gave the slightest nod. the kind only a father can give. Part push, part permission. I turned to the room, throat tight. Jenna stared at me like I was about to ruin her coronation. So I took a breath, looked at the table full of people who had just applauded my erasure, and said, "All right, you want to know? Fine."
I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. And not from fear, but from something heavier. Years of silence and swallowed pride rising like bile to the surface. I took another breath, leveled my gaze across the table, and said, "You all want to toast to Jenna? Fine, but maybe toast to me first, because I'm the reason she even got that job." The room went still. Not just quiet, dead quiet. You could hear the ceiling fan buzzing above us. Jenna scoffed. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe I was finally saying it. "Your company had a hiring freeze. They weren't even accepting new applicants. So when you begged me to review your resume, I didn't just fix your grammar. I sent it to someone I know in HR, someone who owed me a favor. I pulled strings. I made a call. I gave a personal recommendation, and they made an exception. That's how you got the interview, not because you were more qualified, because I handed you the opportunity." My mom's eyes narrowed. "That's not true. Jenna had plenty of qualifications. She majored in art history and couldn't even explain what PR stood for in her cover letter," I said, voice steady. "You think they just pulled her resume out of a stack during a hiring freeze and said, 'Let's give this random applicant a shot'? No, I gave it directly to someone I know in HR, someone who owed me a favor. I pulled strings. I made a call. I gave a personal recommendation, and they made an exception. That's how you got the interview, not because you were more qualified, because I handed you the opportunity." My mom's eyes narrowed. "That's not true. Jenna had plenty of qualifications. She majored in art history and couldn't even explain what PR stood for in her cover letter," I said, voice steady. "You think they just pulled her resume out of a stack during a hiring freeze and said, 'Let's give this random applicant a shot'? No, I gave it directly to someone I mentored 2 years ago at the same company you all pretend I've never been connected to." Jenna's face went pale. Her fiancé leaned back in his chair like he was watching a soap opera. My uncle shifted uncomfortably, chewing slower. No one clapped now. My dad stayed quiet, just watching. Jenna spoke again, softer this time. "You never told me that." "Yeah, because I didn't need credit. I thought maybe for once I could do the right thing without turning it into some kind of contest." My mom's lip curled. "So what? You want a medal for that? You're bitter because we acknowledged your sister?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm bitter because you've never once even seen me." And that was it. It started to rise. Years of it. "Do you remember when I won that national coding competition in high school? Got flown to D.C.? You told everyone it was cute that I was good with computers. Jenna got a participation ribbon in middle school, and you threw her a pizza party. When I graduated college a year early, with honors, you asked if the ceremony was really worth attending. But when Jenna finished a 6-week online course and posted it to Instagram, you printed the certificate and framed it." I paused. The words were flowing now, but each one still stung on the way out. "When I helped you refinance the house after Dad's accident, you said, 'You're so good with numbers,' like I was some walking calculator. I saved you thousands. Did you ever say thank you?" My mom crossed her arms, jaw tightening. "You always make everything about yourself." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "No, you just make sure everything isn't about me. Big difference." Jenna looked down, then up at me. She said, "I didn't ask them to treat me like this." "No," I replied, "but you soaked it in like you earned it. You let it happen. You always do."
The room was still completely silent. Even the younger cousins had stopped squirming. I turned to my dad. "You really want me to tell them everything?" He nodded once. "They should know." I glanced around the table again. "All right," I said, quieter this time. "This is the last Thanksgiving I'll ever spend here. And before I go, I want you all to understand why." My aunt opened her mouth, but my dad cut in. "Let him speak." I turned to my mother. "Do you remember a few months ago when you got that letter from the IRS about the lien on the house? Then a week later, it just vanished? You got a notice saying the case was closed? You told everyone it was a clerical error, said God must have been watching over you." She blinked and frowned. "That was me. I paid it off. Quietly. Because I didn't want Dad to lose the house over something that wasn't even his fault. You didn't even ask questions. You just assumed the universe loved you." Jenna's eyes widened. "Wait, that lien was real?" "Yeah, and I used the last of my savings to clear it." Silence stretched again. Then my mom's voice came, sharper this time. "Well, if you had that kind of money, why didn't you help out when Marin needed her car repaired last month?" I just stared at her. And in that moment, it finally clicked. It wasn't that they didn't understand. It was that they didn't care to. Jenna needing a car somehow mattered more than your home being foreclosed on. That's the math you've been working with? I had nothing left. I used it all. For you. My dad leaned forward.
And then, finally, my dad spoke again. "Mason's the one who bailed us out, not some miracle. He sacrificed, quietly, and I let him. I was too proud to admit we needed help, and he never rubbed it in. Until now." My mom just shook her head, stood up, and muttered something about needing air. Jenna followed her out, looking dazed. And then it was just me, my dad, and a room full of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. He got up, walked over, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stepped in sooner." I nodded, but couldn't speak. The emotion was rushing in fast now. My legs were already moving toward the door. I grabbed my coat from the hallway and stepped out into the cold November air. Just as I reached the sidewalk, I heard the door creak open behind me and someone call my name. I turned. It was Jenna. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. Then she said something I never expected. "Mason, wait. Before you go, there's something I need to admit." I stood there, halfway between the porch and the street, the cold sinking through my jacket into my bones, the kind of chill that had nothing to do with weather. Jenna's voice cracked just slightly, enough to tell me this wasn't some tossed-off apology. She was nervous, really nervous. I turned slowly. "What do you need to admit?" She didn't come down the steps right away, just gripped the doorframe like letting go might knock her over. Her eyes flicked toward the living room, where everyone still sat, awkward, silent, stunned. Then she looked back at me. I knew. Those two words hit harder than I thought they would. I knew about the job, not at first, but after I got the offer, I overheard a call between your friend in HR and their manager. They mentioned your name. I didn't say anything because I wanted to believe I earned it. I didn't respond, just stared. Something in my chest shifted. Not rage, something quieter. Exhaustion soaked in disbelief. Jenna stepped down the first stair. I told myself it didn't matter, that the work was mine after I got it. But then Mom started acting like I was the golden child, and I didn't stop her. I let her believe I did it all on my own. I gave a short, bitter laugh. You didn't just let her, you soaked it up like sunshine. You let her act like I was the disappointment and you were the miracle. I know, she said quietly. I'm not proud of it. I shook my head, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. You could have said something. Any of the 20 times she threw me under the bus just to praise you. Jenna came down another step. I was afraid that if I told the truth, they'd stop seeing me as special. Welcome to my entire childhood, I snapped, a little harsher than I meant to. She flinched, and for the first time, I saw something raw behind all her carefully filtered smiles. Not guilt exactly, something heavier. Shame. I'm sorry. I really am. But that's not all. I frowned. What else? She hesitated, waited, then finally stepped all the way down the path and walked up to me, hands buried deep in her sleeves. Last year, when Dad got hurt and you offered to help with the refinancing, Mom told me not to let you. I blinked. What? She said it would be a mistake to give you control of anything, that you'd just use it to hold something over us. So, when you offered to help, she asked me to talk you out of it. A memory flickered, Jenna's voice on the phone back then, telling me, maybe you should just let them handle it. You've got enough on your plate. I thought she was trying to be thoughtful. Turns out, it was manipulation dressed as concern. I didn't want to do it, she added quickly, but she pushed, and honestly, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. But I did. I went through with it. I spent everything I had. I know, she whispered, and it's eating me alive. We stood there, silent. Through the window, I heard laughter again, nervous, forced. Probably someone had made a bad joke to ease the tension. Most likely my uncle. He always treated conflict like a sitcom. I looked at Jenna. Really looked. I saw the girl who used to sneak into my room when she was afraid of thunderstorms, the one who used to call me my hero. And now, I saw the woman who stood by while our mom erased me, one Thanksgiving at a time. I needed you to know, she said softly. I'm not proud of who I've become around them. I nodded, slow. Thanks, but knowing it doesn't change anything.
I figured, Jenna said quietly, eyes on the ground. I turned to go, but her voice followed, small, almost childlike. There's one more thing. I stopped. She looked up, lips trembling. I think Mom is trying to sell the house. I turned back. What? She's been talking to a realtor, behind Dad's back. She says it's too much to maintain, that she wants to downsize, but that's not the real reason. Then what is? She wants the cash, and she said if she sells before the new year, she doesn't have to list Dad on the paperwork. The deed's still in her name. She's planning to sell and move in with Aunt Rachel. Dad doesn't even know. It felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She said he'll be fine in a condo, Jenna added, but she never mentioned giving him a choice. My hands clenched into fists. She was going to blindside him. Jenna nodded. She told me not to say anything, but after tonight, I couldn't keep it in. The front door opened again, and we both turned. It was our dad. He stood on the porch, quiet for a long moment, then said, "You should both come back inside. There's something I want to say to everyone." Jenna looked at me, unsure, and I had no clue what he was about to do, but something told me it would matter. I didn't move at first. The door was open, my dad standing there like a silhouette cutting through the porch light. Part of me wanted to keep walking, let them all sit in the wreckage they built, but then I glanced at Jenna. Her expression wasn't smug, wasn't expectant. It was the look of someone who knew this would hurt, but was willing to stand there anyway. So I followed him inside. The dining room had gone still. The energy from earlier was gone, replaced by the kind of silence that only comes after something breaks and no one knows how to pick it up. My mom sat at the head of the table again, glass in hand, looking irritated, not guilty, not remorseful, just annoyed. My aunt and uncle were whispering over their wine, heads tilted together like they were waiting for the next scene in a drama. Jenna and I stepped in like we didn't belong there, like party crashers at a celebration we were never meant to be part of, which, honestly, described most of my holidays since I turned 21. My dad didn't sit. He stood at the center of the table, looking everyone in the eye before speaking. I've made a lot of mistakes as a father, more than I probably realize. But the biggest one was letting this family believe that being loud meant being right, that silence meant guilt, that the one who doesn't ask for attention must not need it. He turned and looked straight at me. I've stood by and watched Mason be treated like a ghost, like his accomplishments didn't count because he didn't post about them or tie them in a bow. And I didn't speak up. I let my silence become permission. My mom rolled her eyes and muttered, "Oh, come on." "No, you come on," my dad snapped, his voice louder than I'd heard him in years. "You stood there and made a toast to only one of our kids. You knew exactly what you were doing. Don't pretend it was innocent." She went quiet. Her lips tightened into a hard line. He continued, calmer now. "When Mason was a teenager, he stayed up late helping me with our taxes because we couldn't afford an accountant. When I threw out my back and couldn't work, he took side jobs to help with groceries. He was 18. And when the IRS almost took this house, he paid it off, quietly, without fanfare, without asking for thanks, because that's the kind of man he is." A ripple moved through the room. Some of the relatives looked stunned, genuinely stunned. And while we were all clapping for Jenna, my dad said, glancing briefly her way, we were ignoring the person who was keeping this family standing behind the scenes. Jenna lowered her eyes, ashamed. Then my dad turned to my mom again. "And now I find out you are planning to sell the house, our house, behind my back, after everything he did to save it?" My mother's head snapped up. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. She scoffed and rose from her chair. "It's not like I was going to take the money and disappear. I was planning to help you. I've been managing this house for years while you worked yourself into the ground." "You were going to move in with Rachel," he said, voice trembling. "And leave me where?" "In a condo. It's not like I hadn't thought it through. It's just, I don't—" "No," he cut in, voice firm. "You don't understand. You don't understand what it means to build something and then watch your own family try to tear it down."
It down from the inside. My mom folded her arms, her face flushed with anger, but she didn't speak. My dad turned to me. "Mason, I know I can't undo all the times I didn't defend you, but I see you now. I really do." Something caught in my throat, and for the first time that night, I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. That was enough. But he wasn't done. "I'm making this right," he said, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket. "I've been talking to our lawyer. I added you to the deed." Gasps moved around the table. "Starting next month, you and I will co-own the house. If something happens to me, the mortgage becomes yours, but it'll be fully paid off." He looked at me, really looked. "It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you deserve to have something to show for everything you've given to this family. And no one, not a single person, is going to take that from you." My mom stood up then, voice trembling with fury. "You can't do that without my—" "Actually," he said, lifting another sheet of paper, "I can. Because when we refinanced after the accident, you signed over your rights to me as sole trustee. You just didn't read the fine print. Since then, I've had full legal control." "So yes," he said, his voice like ice, "I can." The color drained from her face. "Now sit down," he said. "You've said enough for one night." And she did. Not because she agreed, but because for the first time, she realized she had no more moves to play. Jenna looked at me with something that wasn't just guilt, it was deeper. Admiration, maybe. Like she was finally seeing the brother she'd underestimated all these years, not as the quiet one, but the one who'd been playing four-dimensional chess while the rest of them were still learning checkers. I didn't say much after that. I didn't need to. The silence around the table spoke louder than anything I could have added.
Eventually, people started to leave, quietly. No hugs, no long goodbyes, just the shuffle of coats and the soft thud of the front door opening and closing. Jenna stayed behind to help clear the dishes. My dad poured himself another glass of wine, then poured one for me. I took it. We stood in the kitchen for a moment. No words, just presence. Then Jenna approached, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and offered me one. I don't know if I can fix all of this, but I want to try. And not just because I feel guilty. Okay, maybe a little because of that, but mostly because I miss having a real brother, not just the idea of one. I raised my cup. We'll see. She smiled, soft, a little sad. Fair. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we weren't on opposite sides of the table anymore either. As I left that night, I glanced back at the house. It looked the same, weathered, familiar, full of history. But something had shifted. For the first time, it felt like mine. Not because my name was on a piece of paper, but because I had finally reclaimed the space they'd tried to edge me out of, the place I'd quietly protected for years. The next day, I got a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to all night. It read, "We were all wrong about you. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a minute before replying, "Don't be sorry. Just be better." Then I put my phone down, made myself breakfast in my tiny apartment, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Not pride, not vindication. Peace. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for an apology and start writing your own ending.